Welcome to the deep dive. We're thrilled you're here today because we're starting with a premise that is just absolutely mind-bending.
It really is a wild one today.
Yeah. I mean, what if the most famous ancient myths from, the Epic of Gilgamesh to the story of Noah's Ark aren't just historical allegories or moral fables?
Right, like not just stories we tell kids.
Exactly. What if they are literal phonetic and geometric blueprints designed for one very specific purpose, which is maintaining your sanity?
It is a completely radical way to view ancient texts. We are stepping way outside the traditional historical lens today to look at these stories as functional tools rather than just mythology.
Way outside. And before we jump in, just a quick reminder for you listening, we are looking at some highly radical alternative translations today. We aren't endorsing these theories as historical fact. Our job is simply to map out the fascinating arguments this specific document is making.
Which is a huge task because the mission of this deep dive is to deconstruct an incredibly dense source document.
So dense.
Right. It links Akkadian, Sumerian, Armenian, and Hebrew concepts into a single unified source code of creation.
And the stakes laid out in the text are what really drew me in. According to our sources, ancient humans viewed the battle between chaos and order not as a physical war with swords and shields, but as a battle of frequencies.
Yes, a literal battle of frequencies. And the goal of our discussion today is to show you how these ancient linguistic and geometric keys were supposedly used to quiet the noise of entropy.
Which we really need today.
Exactly. We want to look at how that concept directly translates to surviving the massive information overload you experience in your everyday modern life.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with phase I, which the source text calls the heart or the archetype. And to do that, it focuses heavily on Utnapishtim.
The flood hero.
Right. For those who might not know, Utnapishtim is the famous flood hero from the ancient Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh. He's the figure who built a boat and survived a world-ending flood. A story written long before Noah.
Long before.
But reading through this document, it completely redefines who, or rather what he is, starting with the breakdown of his name. What exactly is the text doing with the Akkadian etymology here?
What's fascinating here is how it treats his name not as a proper noun, but as a cipher. Traditional history tells us his name, Utnapishtim, roughly translates to he who found life.
Because Ita means to find, right?
Yes, Uta is to find, and Napishtim refers to life or breath or literally the throat. So historically, he is the guy who secured immortality after the flood.
The lucky survivor.
Right, but the document we are analyzing suggests we shouldn't view him as a lucky survivor at all. We should view him as a knowledge custodian.
A custodian. Because the source breaks his name down into UTN and PGHTM, right? It looks like it's treating the letters almost like a structural formula.
Precisely how a modern programmer would look at source code. In this ancient linguistic blueprint, the document argues the U represents the vessel or the ark itself. The TN represents the tone or the blueprint, the structural tension of what is being carried forward. Then you have pish, which means expansion, and tim, which means binding or completeness.
So wait, it's not a guy on a boat with a bunch of animals?
According to this theory, no. When you put the UTN pish tim cipher together, it describes the transmission of life breath. He is carrying the essence, the structural blueprints, the source code of the old world across a cataclysmic reset.
Wow.
He is the archetype of preservation itself.
Which is wild. And that brings us to phase II, which is the tongue. This is where the source text uses an Armenian Sumerian key to unlock the geometry of this code. And I'll be honest, the document takes a hard left turn here into Armenian translation.
It does take a leap, yes.
It points out that the word yut literally means 8. The number 8. Why is the number 8 so critical to this blueprint?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where linguistic roots meet sacred geometry. In ancient Hermetic and Sumerian traditions, the number 7 represents internal completion.
Still point.
Exactly the still point. Think of 7 as the mathematical minimum required to define a closed sphere or a dome. In Sumerian symbolism, this represents the sun as a static, finished object.
But Utnapishtim is the 8th. So if 7 is a closed dome, what happens when you jump to 8?
You get expansion. Consider music. The 8th note is the octave. It's the exact same note as the first, but vibrating on a completely new, higher level.
Oh, that makes sense.
Geometrically moving to 8 represents expanding out into the 8 directions of space, the 4 cardinal directions and the 4 diagonals. It turns a static sphere into a living, active compass.
And in geometry, this balanced multi-directional expansion is known as a vector equilibrium, right?
Yes, perfectly balanced.
The text mentions the Sumerian cuneiform symbol for God, or the sun, the dingir. Does that tie into this 8-directional geometry?
It does perfectly. The Dingir symbol is literally an 8-pointed star. The text is suggesting Utnapishtim embodies this 8-directional active geometry of the sun, but the phonetic cipher goes even further here.
With the Armenian word.
Right. The source supplies the Armenian word bashtem, which means to adore or to worship. So Utnapishtim translates to, I am the adoration of the 8.
I struggled a bit with that phrase when I read it. I am the adoration of the 8. What does it actually mean to adore the 8? It sounds like bowing down to a math equation.
In the context of this document, worship isn't about bowing down to a deity in the sky. It's an action identity. It means actively maintaining the frequency and structural integrity of the universe's 8-directional geometry.
You are holding it up.
Yes, to be the Utnapishtim is to be the active energy that keeps the dome of reality from collapsing back into the void. You're holding the structure together through your focus.
To make this real for you, the listener, the source uses an analogy involving Gilgamesh himself, which I found really compelling. Gilgamesh was grieving, his best friend Enkidu died, and Gilgamesh was shattered. He was wandering the wilderness, absolutely terrified of death.
He was broken.
The document describes him as being broken in 7 time, obsessed with finite mortality and limits. He goes to find Utnapishtim not to get a magic plant for eternal youth, but to get his head together. He needs to learn to operate in 8 time.
Gilgamesh was trapped in the grief of the finite. He couldn't see past the closed dome of mortality. But by encountering the Utnapishtim, he learns to align with the infinite 8-directional compass.
And the proof of this psychological healing is what happens at the end of the epic, right?
Exactly. He returns to his city, Uruk, and for the first time he stops running. He praises the massive brick walls of his city.
He realizes that order limits and the geometry of the 8 are what keep madness out. He stopped chasing the impossible infinite and learned to adore the structure that sustains human life.
Which is a profound shift in consciousness. He moves from being a victim of chaos to an architect of order.
Here's where it gets really interesting as we move into phase 3, which is the battle of frequencies. Our source sets up an epic conflict between the nasal 9 and the solar 8. It argues there is a literal audible battle of frequencies happening inside the human mind. Walk us through these opposing forces.
The 9, or the INM, in this cipher represents the void entropy and chaos. The document describes it as a nasal NNN hum.
Just a continuous hum.
Think about the physical act of making an N sound. Your mouth is closed. Your tongue blocks the airflow. The vibration is trapped entirely inside your nasal cavities. It's the sound of interiority of being closed off.
Like a trap.
The text argues this represents an impossible attempt by the human mind to reach the infinite, a void where no breath, no life can exist.
When the text describes this NNN hum of pure chaos, I immediately pictured myself at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling, doom scrolling on my phone while my brain just vibrates with anxiety. Is that the modern flood they're talking about?
That is a perfect modern translation of the concept. The flood in these ancient myths wasn't a meteorological event of rising water. The flood was this NNN noise.
The anxiety.
It was the feeling of your mind dissolving into the nasal hum of pure chaos, anxiety, and entropy. It is the overload of infinite, unstructured information drowning out your structural integrity.
Conversely, we have the 8, the UTN. The text calls this the orb, the pressurized perfect surface of the sun. It is the harmonic vowel of structure and order. So how does the document say we fight the nasal hum of the void?
Through what it calls the final proclamation. You open your mouth and let out an open sound.
Just to clear.
It represents the clearing of the lungs. It is the literal breath of life, the Utnapishtim pushing back the constriction of the 9. It's the sound of the sun breathing. You are using a harmonic vowel to physically push the chaotic consonants out of your head.
Okay, the source goes into some incredibly heavy math here regarding this geometric battle, specifically tying it to the biblical story of Noah's Ark. In Genesis, the ark's dimensions are 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high.
Right, the standard biblical measurement.
The document reduces those numbers to a 30:5:3 ratio. Walk me through what it does with those numbers, because visualizing this was tough for me.
It requires a bit of mental drafting. Let's look at the cross-section of the arc. The width is 5. So if we divide that in half to find the center point, we get 2.5.
I get 2.5.
The height of the arc is 3. If you draw a diagonal line from that center point at the base to the top outer corner, you're creating a right triangle. To find that diagonal, the hypotenuse, you use the Pythagorean theorem.
Wait, slow down. I'm trying to draw this in my head. We have a base of 2.5 and a height of 3. What does that hypotenuse come out to?
It comes out to roughly 3.9, which scales and rounds conceptually in the sacred geometry to a 4.
So you get a 3-4-5 right-angled triangle.
Exactly. The 3-4-5 triangle is the most fundamental and sacred shape in classical architecture. It guarantees a perfect right angle, which is the foundation of stable building.
Without it, everything collapses.
Right. The document argues that the arc is actually a 3D mathematical model of sacred geometry. It is an expression of cosmic order known in ancient Vedic traditions as Atta.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't it a massive stretch to say the builders of the Ark or the writers of Genesis were secretly encoding Pythagorean geometry before Pythagoras was even born?
From a traditional historical or archaeological perspective, absolutely. Most historians would reject that outright. But remember our lens for today. The source material argues that this mathematical harmony is a universal constant.
It's just baked into reality.
Yes. The Ark wasn't just a wooden boat meant to float on water. It was a harmonic shield, a geometric covenant built to resonate against the NNN flood of chaos. The math is the magic.
The document even ties this back to ancient Egypt, specifically the Memphite theology of the god Ptah. I read that Ptah is the creator god who brings the universe into being using his heart, which represents thought, and his tongue, which represents speech. How does that connect to the math of the Ark?
The connection there is profound. If the Ark's sacred 3-4-5 geometry is the heart, the physical structured stabilizing thought, then the open vocal frequency, the ella, is the tongue.
You need both.
You need both the mental structure and the active vocal resonance to create and stabilize reality against the chaotic flood of the 9.
Okay, so we've established the architecture, the physical walls in our mind, the masculine structure, the rigid geometry of the 8. But a rigid wall isn't enough to sustain life, which brings us to phase 3, the flow.
This is where it shifts.
Yeah, the document takes a surprising pivot to the feminine principle, and it uses a name everyone knows, Mary Magdalene.
Historically, Magdalene is translated as Mary of Magdala, a Galilean fishing town. The name derives from the Hebrew word migdal, meaning tower.
But our source applies the exact same phonetic cipher to her name as it did to Utnapishtim.
It does.
It breaks down Magdalene into Megdal and INN. I need help unpacking this one. What do those 3 syllables represent in this code?
Meg represents the monad. Think of the monad as the absolute, the first spark of becoming the singular point of origin. Dal is an Armenian verb meaning to give or to transmit.
And INN?
And INN, as we just established with the nasal hum, represents the chaotic 9, the infinite void.
So when you synthesize Megdal INN, she becomes the one who gives the 9.
That is the translation the document provides. If Utnapishtim is the rigid structural 8 that holds the line against chaos, Magdalene represents the flowing 9 given back to the 1.
It's a loop.
It describes a toroidal flow of energy. For those trying to visualize that, think of the shape of a donut where energy flows up through the middle, spirals out over the top, and loops back around the bottom constantly. The 1 gives the 9, and the 9 gives the 1.
It's the ultimate balancing act. You have the unyielding structure, but it's filled with this constant renewing flow. The source also points out that the name Mary comes from the root Mar, meaning the sea or the heavenly waters.
Yes, the waters.
But in the context of this document, these waters aren't the chaotic, destructive flood we talked about earlier.
No. In this framework, the heavenly waters represent the pressurized, balancing atmosphere inside the dome of the Ark.
Inside the structure.
Exactly. Mary Magdalene is decoded here as the feminine principle of transmission. She is the internal atmosphere that allows the rigid masculine structure of the Utnapishtim to actually contain life.
Because without it, it's just a box.
Without the flow of the 9 being continually given back to the 1, the structure would be empty and dead. It would just be a sterile box.
It's just an incredible way to read these archetypes.
Yeah.
We have the heart and the tongue, the structure and the flow. Which brings us to our final phase, phase V, the activation. The text brings all of this together with something it calls the DAF-10 platform. What exactly is the DAS platform?
The DAS platform is presented as the ultimate observatory for the human mind. In this linguistic breakdown, DAF represents the platform, the door, the established order you stand on. It's your secure footing.
Then the S.
S represents the spirit, the radiant measure that flows out into the cosmos from where you stand.
So you stand firmly on the day and you flow at the S. The source says to achieve this, the observer has to bag the digits from 0 to 9. It calls this the M to N spiral in time. What does it mean to bag the digits?
To put it simply, bagging the digits means mastering the complete toolkit of universal principles. It means you have integrated the entire spectrum of these frequencies, from the still potential of 0 all the way to the forward chaotic momentum of 9.
You've collected them all.
Once you understand how all these numbers operate, you possess an instrument of cosmic navigation. You can measure the infinite without being swallowed by the chaotic hum of the void. You are no longer overwhelmed by it.
And the final activation of this whole system is a sound. The observer stands on the DAS platform, looks out the universe, and cries out the I-O, the letter I and the letter O.
It is the ultimate binary code. The I is the pillar, the monad, the number 1, the vertical structure. The O is the orb, the womb, the number 0, the infinite potential.
When the observer sounds the I-O, they undergo a fundamental shift in consciousness.
They do.
They realize the universe isn't just random, terrifying chaos. They see the measured flow. They see that reality is held together by this beautiful 30:5:3 harmonic ratio. They aren't just a victim of the flood anymore.
In sounding the I-O, the observer officially becomes the architect. They are using their heart and tongue, their conscious awareness, and their physical voice to actively maintain the geometric covenant of reality.
So what does this all mean for you? Why does this dense, ancient linguistic code matter when you're driving to work or sitting at your desk or staring at your phone late at night?
It matters because the flood isn't a historical event trapped in antiquity.
No, the flood is the modern feeling of your mind completely dissolving to the noise of information overload. It's the endless doom scrolling, the anxiety, the NNN, nasal hum of pure entropy pulling at your attention every single second of the day.
This source material, radical as it is offering a framework for psychological survival. It suggests that you survive the modern flood by building your own orb.
By using your heart and tongue.
Yes. You use your own heart and tongue, your conscious thought, and your articulated speech to establish structure and boundaries in your life. You have to actively adore the 8. You have to maintain the limits that keep your mind sane, just like Gilgamesh realizing the value of the walls of his city.
You stop chasing the impossible, chaotic infinite, and you anchor yourself in the present structure. You open your mouth, take a deep breath, and let out that clear A to push back the noise. You get your head together.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to consider that builds on everything we've discussed today. We've spent this deep dive exploring how ancient languages and archetypes were supposedly designed to maintain human sanity through highly specific vocal frequencies and geometric limits.
The heart and the tongue.
But look at how we communicate today. We live in an era of silent, text-based, emoji-driven communication. We are absorbing infinite amounts of unstructured data without ever opening our mouths to vocalize a stabilizing frequency.
That is terrifying to think about.
If this ancient blueprint is correct, if our psychological structure literally depends on the physical vibration of the tongue pushing back the chaotic void, what is this silent digital communication doing to the architecture of our minds? Are we drowning in the flood simply because we've forgotten how to speak the geometry of the lifeboat?
A massive question to take with you and a totally different way to look at how we use our voices. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a completely new lens to look through. Keep your head together, build your walls, and stay curious. We'll see you next time.